The man in Bay 4 was not supposed to be alive. Zara Collins knew that the moment she pulled the curtain. 3 lacerations, 1 deep puncture wound below the left ribs, bruising that bloomed purple and black across his torso, as if something terrible had been mapped onto his skin. His shirt had been cut away, she didn't know by whom, and his eyes were open, watching her with an expression that was not pain and not fear. It was patience. That was the part that unsettled her. Most men with wounds like his came in screaming or unconscious or somewhere in between. This man lay still. His jaw was tight. His breathing was controlled. The heart monitor beside him beeped at a rate too steady to be accidental. He was managing himself, regulating himself, like a machine that had been trained not to malfunction in public. She reached for her gloves. "Who brought you in?" she asked. "Does it matter?" His voice was low, unhurried, an accent that softened the consonants without announcing itself. "It matters for the chart." "Then leave the chart blank." Zara stopped, looked at him. He looked back. She had been a nurse for 6 years in this hospital, Koreatown Medical Center, the one that sat on the edge of everything. She had seen things. She had learned to ask fewer questions than she used to, but she had never completely stopped asking. "You have a puncture wound 4 centimeters from your spleen," she said. "I need to know if there's internal bleeding." "There isn't." "You can't know that." "I know my body." She looked at him for 1 more second. Then she snapped on her gloves and got to work. She didn't ask anything else. That was her first mistake. Her second was not leaving when she had the chance. Before we go any further, if this story already has you, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Drop your country in the comments. I want to know where my listeners are from. Now let's get back to Zara. Zara Collins was 31 years old, and she had built her entire life on the principle that competence was the safest form of armor. She grew up in Inglewood, not far from where the sound of sirens was just background noise, the kind of thing you stopped hearing after a while. Her mother was a home health aide. Her father left when she was 9. Not dramatically, not with a fight, just quietly, like a tide going out. She remembered standing at the window for 3 weeks waiting for him to come back. He didn't. She stopped waiting. She never quite explained to herself how that happened, only that one morning she woke up and the waiting was gone. She put herself through nursing school on loans and night shifts at a Walgreens on Crenshaw. She graduated second in her cohort. She had an offer from Cedars-Sinai, better pay, better hours, better everything. She turned it down and took the position at Koreatown Medical instead. Her supervisor asked why. "Because people here needed more," she said. He looked at her like she was naive. Maybe she was, or maybe she understood something about proximity, about how the people closest to danger were usually the furthest from care. She had grown up in the gap between those 2 things. She knew what it felt like. 6 years later, she was still here. She knew the night staff by name, knew which vending machine gave an extra bag of chips if you pressed C7 twice, and knew which doctors to trust in a crisis and which ones to quietly route around. She was good at her job. Excellent, actually. Steady hands, clear eyes, the ability to be present with someone in pain without absorbing it. She had a 1-bedroom apartment 12 minutes from the hospital, a small balcony where she kept 2 plants, one thriving, one perpetually struggling. She had a best friend named Denise that texted her memes at 2 a.m. She had a thing with a physical therapist named Marcus that had started 6 months ago and had recently begun dying the slow, quiet death of 2 people who were simply not right for each other. She was not unhappy. She was not broken. She was simply a woman who had gotten very good at keeping her world small enough to manage. That was before the man in Bay 4. She had come in for a double shift on a Tuesday, which was already the wrong kind of Tuesday, gray-skied and damp, the kind of weather that pushed everything uncomfortable just slightly closer to the surface. The ER had been moving fast since 7. A fender bender on Vermont, a kitchen fire, a kid who swallowed something he shouldn't have. And then Bay 4. The curtain had been drawn when she clocked in. Her charge nurse, Sandra, had handed her the tablet with a look that said, "Don't ask," more clearly than words could. Bay 4 is yours. He's been triaged. No ID. Paid cash, a lot of it at intake. No police. Zara raised an eyebrow. Sandra shook her head once. Zara took the tablet. She walked to the Bay 4. She pulled back the curtain. And there he was. His name was Jae-won Oh. He had not always been the man he is now. There was a version of him 14 years old in Seoul, watching his father press his thumb against a debt ledger, who believed that loyalty was enough, that if you gave everything to the people who were supposed to protect you, they would. His father was a bookkeeper for the Oh family's organization, not the dangerous part, the quiet part, numbers, columns, the architecture that held the operation upright. He was a careful man, a decent man, the kind of man who taught his son to read financial statements the same way other fathers taught their sons to ride bikes. They killed him for a ledger entry he refused to change. He was 18 years old. He had come home from a university entrance exam to find the apartment dark, his mother sitting at the kitchen table with her hands folded in her lap, her face arranged into something that was not grief yet, because grief requires time to arrive. He stood in the doorway. She looked up. She said, "They said it was an accident." Something went quiet inside him that night. Not off, quiet, like a frequency that dropped below the human hearing but never disappeared entirely. He did not grieve his father loudly. He did not fall apart. He folded that loss into the deepest part of himself, and then he spent the next 8 years learning every name, every favor, every debt in the organization that had called his father's death an accident. He did not take revenge the way movies showed it. He did not need to. He simply became indispensable, then irreplaceable, then intouchable. He moved to Los Angeles at 26. Koreatown welcomed him the way power always recognized power, quietly, without fanfare, with a series of small doors opening that were usually locked. His father's ledger sat in a locked drawer in his office. He had retrieved it from the man who ordered his father's death. He never opened it. He just needed to know it was there. The thing about carrying grief quietly is that it becomes indistinguishable from strength. People look at you and they see composure. They see control. They see a man who cannot be rattled. They do not see the 14-year-old standing in a dark doorway, watching his mother not cry. He had never told anyone about the ledger. He had never told anyone about the doorway. He had never needed to. Until now. He lay in Bay 4, his eyes on the ceiling, the fluorescent light above him flickering slightly, and a nurse with careful hands and a look that asked nothing, pulling on her gloves. He told himself he did not want to be seen. He had believed that for a long time.
She worked without speaking for nearly 4 minutes. He tracked her with his eyes without turning his head, the way something still and precise watches movement, not threatening, just aware, always aware. She cleaned the lacerations, applied pressure to the puncture site, checked his pupils, his pulse, the color at the edges of his nail beds. Her hands moved with the confidence of someone who had done this so many times it had become muscle memory, but the attention behind it was still sharp, present. She was not going through motions. He noticed that. "You didn't call anyone," he said. "You didn't ask me to." Most nurses call security with wounds like this. Zara applied the last piece of medical tape with a firm press of her thumb. She straightened up, looked at him directly. "Is that a test?" she asked. Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. "Just an observation. I'm a nurse. My job is to treat the wound in front of me." She stripped off her gloves, dropped them in the biohazard bin. "Whatever made the wound is not my department. That's an unusual policy. It's how I've stayed employed for 6 years." He studied her. She let him. She did not look away, and she did not perform comfort for him. She simply stood there with the slight lift of her chin that said, "I am not afraid of you looking at me." "Zara," he said, reading her badge. "Mr. J." She wrote nothing on the chart. He noticed that, too. "I'll send someone to check on the wound in 4 hours," she said. "You shouldn't move for at least 2. If the pain increases here," she touched a spot on her own ribcage, mirroring the location of his injury, "you tell whoever is on shift. No heroics." "Understood." She started to pull the curtain closed. "Zara." She stopped, did not turn around. "Thank you," he said. 2 words, quiet, direct, without performance. She pulled the curtain shut. In the hallway, she stood still for exactly 3 seconds, breathing, hand flat against the wall. She didn't know his name. She didn't know what he was. She didn't know that the 4 men sitting in a black SUV in the hospital parking lot were not visiting a patient. She didn't know that she had just treated the most powerful man in Koreatown. She didn't know he would be back. She didn't know she was already being watched, and not by him. He came back on a Thursday, not as a patient. He walked through the ER's side entrance at 11:15 at night, the entrance that stayed propped open on certain nights by certain staff, wearing a charcoal jacket and no expression. His men stayed outside, all of them. He came alone. Zara was at the nurse's station finishing a chart when she looked up. Her pen stopped. He walked to the station as though he had an appointment. "You shouldn't be in here," she said. "I wanted to check in. There are phones for that. I don't use phones for things I can say in person." She looked at him. He looked back. The ER hummed around them, monitors, distant voices, and the squeak of a gurney wheel somewhere down the hall. Her colleague Pia glanced up from across the station, then very deliberately looked back down at her screen. "Your wound," Zara said. "How is it?" "Healing. You did clean work." "It's my job." "I know." He placed a folded paper on the counter, not pushed toward her, just placed. She looked at the paper, did not touch it. "What is that?" "A donation for the ward, anonymous." She looked up at him. "I don't need." "It's not for you," he said. "It's for the patients, the ones who come in and can't pay. I understand this ward has a deficit." She stared at him. She had never told anyone about the ward's deficit. It wasn't public. It was the kind of thing that lived in administrative emails and closed-door budget meetings. "How do you know about that?" she asked. He didn't answer. Something clicked into place in her mind, quiet, like a lock turning. She looked at him now with the box open. "Who are you?" she said. Not afraid, just asking. "Someone who pays his debts," he said. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now." She glanced at Pia, who was aggressively pretending not to exist. She looked back at him. "Take your money and go." Her voice was level, not hostile, just firm. He held her gaze for 3 full seconds. Then he picked up the folded paper. He left. Pia let out a breath loud enough to be heard from 3 feet away. "Zara," Pia whispered, "do you know who that is?" "No," Zara said. She went back to her chart. "And I don't want to." But her pen didn't move for a full minute after she said it. He came back on a Thursday, not as a patient. He walked through the ER's side entrance at 11:15 at night, the entrance that stayed propped open on certain nights by certain staff, wearing a charcoal jacket and no expression. His men stayed outside, all of them. He came alone. Zara was at the nurse's station finishing a chart when she looked up. Her pen stopped. "You shouldn't be in here," she said. "I wanted to check in. There are phones for that. I don't use phones for things I can say in person." She looked at him. He looked back. The ER hummed around them. Monitors, distant voices, and the squeak of a gurney wheel somewhere down the hall. Her colleague Pia glanced up from across the station, then very deliberately looked back down at her screen. "Your wound," Zara said. "How is it?" "Healing. You did clean work." "It's my job." "I know." He placed a folded paper on the counter. Not pushed toward her, just placed. She looked at the paper, did not touch it. "What is that?" "A donation for the ward. Anonymous." She looked up at him. "I don't need—" "It's not for you," he said. "It's for the patients, the ones who come in and can't pay. I understand this ward has a deficit." She stared at him. She had never told anyone about the ward's deficit. It wasn't public. It was the kind of thing that lived in administrative emails and closed-door budget meetings. "How do you know about that?" she asked. He didn't answer. Something clicked into place in her mind, quiet, like a lock turning. She looked at him now with the box open. "Who are you?" she said. Not afraid, just asking. "Someone who pays his debts," he said. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now." She glanced at Pia, who was aggressively pretending not to exist. She looked back at him. "Take your money and go." Her voice was level, not hostile, just firm. He held her gaze for 3 full seconds. Then he picked up the folded paper. He left. Pia let out a breath loud enough to be heard from 3 feet away. "Zara," Pia whispered. "Do you know who that is?" "No," Zara said. She went back to her chart. "And I don't want to." But her pen didn't move for a full minute after she said it. She left work at 2 in the morning. The parking structure behind the hospital was half lit. 2 of the fluorescent panels on the 3rd level had been flickering for weeks, and facilities kept pushing the repair. She'd filed the complaint herself. She walked fast out of habit, keys between her fingers, with the particular alertness of a woman who had been navigating this city alone at night her entire adult life. She heard the footsteps when she reached the 2nd level. 2 men. She knew from the sound, cadence, spacing, and the way they were not trying to be quiet. That was always the more frightening kind. The ones who didn't bother hiding meant they weren't worried about witnesses. She turned the corner toward her car, and they were already there. Not random. She understood that immediately. These were not opportunists, they were stationed. The taller one looked at her with the particular flatness of someone doing a job. "Zara Collins," he said. Italian accent, faint, but there. Her name, in a parking garage, at 2 in the morning. Her keys were in her hand. Her phone was in her scrub's pocket. She ran the math in her head. Distance to the stairwell, distance to her car, whether she was faster than both of them, and whether screaming would bring anyone in time.
"You have the wrong person," she said. "We don't." The second man took a step forward. A car engine turned over. All three of them turned. A black SUV pulled around the corner of the level, moving slowly, headlights cutting across the concrete. It stopped. The driver's window came down. One of the men from inside said something in Korean, short and flat, like reading from a list. The two men went still. Then they left, quickly, without looking at her again. The SUV sat there. Zara didn't move. The back window came down. Jae-won Oh sat in the shadow of the back seat. He looked at her with that same patience she had seen in Bay 4, as though he had been waiting, as though he had expected this exact moment. He did not say, "You're welcome." He did not say, "I told you so." He said, "Get somewhere with people. Not home. Not tonight." The window went back up. The SUV pulled away. She stood in the parking garage for a long time. The flickering fluorescent above her buzzed and hummed. Her hands were steady. Her mind was not. He had been here. He had been waiting. That meant he knew they were coming, which meant he had known they were watching her, which meant a great deal of things she was not ready to think about yet. She took the stairs back to the hospital and sat in the break room until the sun came up. He came back 2 nights later. It was raining. She found him sitting in his SUV in the hospital loading bay. Not the main entrance, not the ER drop-off, the loading bay, where supply trucks came at 6 a.m. and which was otherwise empty after midnight. She had gone out to get air. She did that sometimes when a shift went heavy, standing outside in the cold with her arms crossed and her eyes closed until whatever it was settled back down. She opened her eyes and the SUV was there. She walked to it. She knocked on the window. It came down. "You can't keep appearing places," she said. "I'm not inside the hospital." "You're in the loading bay." "Technically that's... don't." But there was no heat in it. She was too tired for heat. He looked at her. The rain fell on the concrete around them, loud and steady. The light in the bay was yellow and old, and it made everything look like a photograph from another decade. "Go home, Jay," she said. It was the first time she had used his name. Both of them noticed. "Tell me what you know about those men." "They work for the Ricci family." "Italian Mafia?" "Yes." "Why were they at my hospital?" A pause, short. She watched him decide something. "Because of me," he said. "They know you treated me. They thought..." He stopped, started again. "They were sending a message." She looked at the rain, then back at him. "So I'm in the middle of something I didn't choose." "Yes." "And you knew that when you came back the second time?" He didn't answer, which was its own kind of answer. "Jay," she kept her voice even, "if you knew I was in danger because of you, you should have stayed away from me, not come back, not whatever this is." "I know." "Then why?" "Because I made a choice." His voice was still low, but something in it was different now. The patience was the same, but underneath it was something else, something that had weight. "It means you're not alone in this, whatever this is." She should have walked away. She had every reason to. She knew that, and she felt it, and she stood there anyway in the rain with her arms crossed and her eyes on his face. "You scared me in that parking garage. Not the men. You. I don't like being maneuvered." "I know. Don't do it again." I mean it." "I heard you." She uncrossed her arms, took a step back. "Go home," she said again, but this time it sounded different, less like a boundary and more like something close to care. She went back inside. He sat in the loading bay for a while after she left, in the dark, in the rain, the way a man sits when something has shifted inside him that he is not yet ready to name. She was pulling a double shift on Saturday when Sandra called her into the back office. There were two people in the office that were not Sandra, a man and a woman, suits. The kind of professional blank expression that meant federal government, and specifically the kind that did not need to show you a badge twice. "Ms. Collins," he said, "I'm Agent Torres. This is Agent Park. We're with the FBI." Zara kept her face still. She sat down across from them. "We're going to be direct with you, Ms. Collins," Agent Park said. She was Korean-American, in her late 30s, and she watched Zara with the careful attention of someone who already knew more than she was about to reveal. "You treated a patient 3 nights ago. No chart, cash payment at intake." Zara said nothing. "We believe that patient was Jae-won Oh, also known as the Koreatown Don. He controls organized crime in a 12-block area, including significant drug distribution, weapons movement, and extortion operations." The photograph was surveillance, long lens, Jae-won getting into an SUV outside what looked like a restaurant. His face was partially turned. He looked the same as he always did, still composed, as though the camera didn't exist. "I treat a lot of patients. I don't always know names." "We're not here to charge you with anything," Park said. "We're here because we believe you're now on the radar of the Ricci crime family due to your contact with O. We have reason to believe that contact is ongoing." The room held a particular kind of quiet. "We want to offer you protection," Torres said. "In exchange for what?" Zara asked. Neither of them answered immediately, which was an answer. "Information, access, anything you hear or see in proximity to him." There it was. Zara looked at the photograph again, at the man getting into the car, at the steadiness in his posture that she recognized. That was the same quality of control she had seen in Bay 4, that same patience. She thought about the parking garage, about the two men, about her name said in the dark by someone who was not there by accident. She thought about the loading bay, the rain. You're not alone in this. She thought about 6 years of keeping her world small, of the sealed box on the shelf, of the choice she made every morning to show up and do the work and not ask the questions whose answers might change everything. "I need to think about it," she said. Torres nodded, slid a card across the desk. "We'd like an answer quickly, Ms. Collins. In Koreatown, things are moving. If the Ricci family escalates..." "I said I need to think about it." Park looked at her for a moment. Then she nodded once. Zara took the card. She walked back to the floor.
Her hands were steady. Her mind was a storm. He had been protecting her from the moment she treated him. She understood that now. Before she even knew his name, before she knew what he was, he had already made a decision about her. And now, the FBI wanted her to make a decision about him. If you feel every single thing right now, that is exactly what this story is made for. Hit that like button if you were riding with Zara. Subscribe because part 2 is coming and I promise you are not ready. Back to the story. She went to him. She told herself she was going to end it, whatever it was, the thing that had started without her permission in Bay 4. She was going to tell him about the FBI and tell him to stay away from her and mean it this time and walk back into her small, manageable life. She got his location from a source she didn't ask too many questions about, an address that Sandra had written on a napkin and pressed into her hand with the words, "Be careful," and eyes that held a history Zara didn't have time to unpack. The building was in the heart of Koreatown, a restaurant on the ground floor, dark at this hour, and above it a series of lit windows. His men were outside. She walked toward the entrance and they stepped together, a wall of silence. She stopped. "Tell him Zara Collins is here," she said. "He knows who I am." A long pause, a phone retrieved, a brief exchange in Korean. The door opened. She was led up a staircase to a room that was almost nothing like she expected. No weapons on the walls, no theater of power, just a large space with good furniture and one window that faced the street below, rain tracing its lines down the glass. Shelves of books, a desk, a lamp that threw warm light across everything. He was standing at the window when she came in. He turned. His men left and closed the door. "You went to the FBI," he said. "They came to me." He nodded, like he had already known. "They want me to inform on you," she said. "I know." "How do you know?" "Because I've been aware of their surveillance for 3 weeks." He crossed the room slowly. The neon from outside cut across his face through the rain-streaked window and stopped a few feet from her. "I knew they would approach you." "Then why didn't you warn me?" "I was trying to keep you away from all of it." "By keeping me in the dark?" "Yes." "That's not protection, that's control." Something moved across his face, quick, like a door opening and immediately closing. "You're right," he said. She had not expected that. The agreement, the quiet acceptance of it, without defense, without negotiation. She looked at him in the warm light of the lamp, the window behind him, the rain. Those men in the parking garage, that wasn't a warning. They were going to take me. "Yes." "Because of you?" "Yes." "And you've been running interference since before I knew I needed it." "Yes." She exhaled, long and slow. "Why?" she said. "I'm nobody to you. I was a nurse who treated your wound and kept her mouth shut. Why?" "Because you looked at me," he said. She stopped. "In Bay 4, his voice was quieter now, still low, but different. "You looked at me the way a person looks at another person, not at what I am, not at what I might do, not at what I could give you." He paused. "No one does that." She didn't speak. "My father was killed by the people he gave his loyalty to." He didn't look away from her. "I have not told anyone anything real in—" He stopped, began again. "You did not ask me who made the wound. You just—" His jaw tightened. "You just fixed it." The lamplight, the rain on the glass. Zara stood very still. She understood something now that she hadn't before. The patience, the silence, the control that wasn't coldness, but was, in fact, the opposite of coldness. It was the careful management of something that ran very deep and very hot and had been kept under pressure for a very long time. "Jay," she said. He looked at her. "I'm not going to inform on you, but not for your sake, for mine, because I don't do things I can't live with." He was quiet. "But I need you to stop making decisions for me, about what I know, about what I can handle. I've been handling things alone since I was 9 years old. I don't need a guardian." "What do you need?" he asked. The question sat between them like something neither of them had expected. "The truth," she said. "When it affects me, that's all." He held her gaze for a long moment. "All right," he said. 2 words, the same weight as everything else he said. She breathed. Neither of them moved. The rain came down. She didn't go home that night. Not because anything happened, because they sat across from each other in that room with good furniture and a lamp throwing warm light, and talked, actually talked, for the first time without armor or agenda. He told her about Seoul, about the ledger in the drawer. Not everything, but enough. The door opens just a crack. She told him about her father, about the window she stood at for 3 weeks, about the morning the waiting stopped. He listened the way certain people listen, with his whole body still and his entire attention present, like what she was saying mattered in a way that had nothing to do with what he could do with it. She left at 4 in the morning. He walked her to the car. His men stood at a distance that was both professional and deliberate. She noticed they did not look at her the way men usually looked at a woman leaving their boss's building late in the night. They looked at her with something close to pity. She wasn't sure. Deference, maybe. The particular respect given to someone who has been placed in a category that didn't exist before. At her car, she turned. The FBI is going to come back. I know. When they do, I will handle what is mine to handle. You handle what is yours. She nodded. She got into the car. He closed the door for her. His hand rested on the roof for a moment, not restraining, just there, a gesture so quiet it barely existed. She drove away. In her rearview mirror, she could see him standing in the rain, watching, not moving, the way he always watched, with patience that looked like stillness, but wasn't. She exhaled, let her shoulders drop. She thought, I don't know what this is. She thought, I don't know if I can afford to find out. She thought about Bay 4, the curtain, the man with 3 lacerations and a puncture wound 4 centimeters from his spleen, the heart monitor beeping too steadily to be accidental. His voice, does it matter? She had treated his wound without asking questions. She understood now that she had been wrong about one thing. She had thought she wasn't asking questions. She had not realized he was already answering them. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. She glanced at it. Unknown number, a text, 3 words. They found the ledger. She looked up from the phone. In her rearview mirror, the street behind her was empty. He was gone. And somewhere in the dark and the rain of Koreatown, something had just started moving that was not going to stop. She had been here before, in a parking garage, in a loading bay, in Bay 4, but not like this. Never like this. If this story moved you, you already know what to do. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell because part 2 is coming soon. Comment below, do you trust him? Because I am not sure Zara should. See you in part 2.